Food actually, we have to grow food. We have to grow food in terms of crops, right? We have to grow food in terms of animals, right? You eat a T-bone steak, you eat shrimps, you eat, different types of food, right? Okay. Um, Fishing, you know, is also a way to obtain food, right? So we have to think of what we do to obtain that food. There are harmful ways to obtain that food. There are sustainable ways to obtain that food. Let's take a look at some of the things that is being done. Now, some harmful farming methods include, for instance, planting only a few genetic varieties. Now, by planting only a few genetic varieties, what happens is that if there is a disease that strikes, well, your crop is going to disappear, right? If, for instance, you are growing tilapia and it's one single kind of tilapia, if there is a disease in the population, that's it. You're going to lose all your tilapia, right? Same thing for salmon, right? So it's not very smart to actually use one single type of crop, one single type of fish, one single type of meat, right? Meat source. So the heavy use of fertilizers, it's a major problem, right? To our environment, to our health. The use of pesticide, insecticide has an impact on our environment and our health and the health of living organisms around us. Now, in the previous chapter, we talked, for instance, about biological magnification, right? Which is when we have an accumulation of a toxic compound in living organisms as we go high in the trophic level, right? While at the bottom of the trophic level, the pollutant is in low concentration. At the top level of the trophic the trophic line, well, you're going to have a high concentration of that heavy metal, for instance. So excessive fuel consumption because of all the machines we use in industrial farming, right? All of that uses fuel, right? And basically fossil fuel. And the amount of water that we are using, that is insane. So the current farming methods are problematic, right? So we have to find ways to solve that problem. How problematic these approaches are? By loss of soil, okay? Because of loss of soil, we have erosion, right? We have degradation of the environment and salinization of the soil, right? Because of the water wiping the soil so that you have a lot of salt, that become abundant in the topsoil, which is actually not sustainable for a long time. So there are really controversies around what kind of crops are we growing, right? And particularly genetically engineered crops, right? How are we using them? So the livestock that we are maintaining, right? So how do we deal with the waste associated with this livestock, right? We have pollution associated with farming, the energy that is needed to actually raise this livestock is actually costing a lot. So there are methods today that are used to actually tackle the problem associated with harmful farming. some suggestions and what is already been used in many places. It's for instance polyculture, right? Where you have in this farm, you see that we do have some corn, right? So some rows of corn, and in between you're going to have alfalfa. This alfalfa, it's actually a type of a plant that has nodules that house what do you call those? Nitrogen fixing bacteria, right? Which actually decreases the need to use fertilizers in this land. Okay. Now we have the contour farming. Contour farming, it's a technique that allows us to avoid erosion. So rather than water running off and taking away the soil, actually the water is being retained in an area so that that water actually doesn't wash away the soil. And using biological pest control, like here, we have a ladybug that is feeding on an aphid, and this aphid actually they are bad for the crop. So by putting in the area this this ladybug, that ladybug is actually going to get rid of to sustain population growth and the need of that population. You need energy, right? Well, you have two forms of energy. You have renewable forms of energy, and you have non-renewable forms of energy. In terms of non-renewable forms of energy, we're going to have the fossil fuels, oil, natural gas, coal, nuclear source of energy, right? Now, burning fossil fuel, it's a problem, right? It's a problem because they're going to produce toxic waste that are harmful to the environment, right? The fossil fuel that we use is going to represent about 81% of the energy that we are using worldwide, right? Downside, you have greenhouse gases that is associated with global warming. That is a problem, right? Moving to renewable energy sources, it's a must. We don't have a choice. That's a must, right? What are some renewable energy sources? We have hydropower, geothermal energy, wind energy, and solar energy. Hopefully, wind energy and solar energy are going to be more and more available and cheaper. We hope that. And actually, wind energy and solar energy is becoming more and more cheap, which is a good news, right? Solar and hydrogen revolution these days, it's actually also another source of energy that is progressively replacing fossil fuel, which is again a good thing. So here we have hydropower. Here we have photovoltaic plates to actually convert solar energy into the energy that can be used in houses, right? We have wind and other renewable sources of energy here. So the minerals are going to be needed to sustain a population, right? These minerals are going to be part of the non-renewable raw material in the earth, and specifically in the crust of the earth. We have to dig in to obtain these minerals, right? Minerals are found in fossil fuels. They are found as non-metallic minerals, but also as metallic minerals. The non-metallic minerals are going to include, for instance, sand and phosphate. In among the metallic minerals, you're going to have copper, for instance, that is used for wiring in houses so you can have electricity, right? Iron is very much used for a number of things. We are producing a lot of waste, right? And this waste, unfortunately, is harmful to the environment, but also to us because we actually use heavy metals, right? The production of plastic, right? Pesticide and herbicides is another source of pollution because you have a lot of waste, and actually you have microplastic that is found in oceans and seas and rivers. So the big plastic, it's, I want to say, almost easy to deal with, right? Because we do see that plastic. What we don't see is the microplastic, right? This microplastic, it's actually becoming a serious problem in bodies of waters, including oceans and seas and rivers, and actually organisms that live in these environments are being poisoned by these microplastics, right? We have other chemicals such as CFC, chlorofluorocarbons, and this CFC can actually alter the ozone layer. Now, the ozone layer, it creates actually a shield. That shield prevents some harmful radiations of the sun to reach the earth. However, we found that ozone layer, these harmful radiations are going to reach the earth, causing outbreaks of cancers, for instance, like skin cancers, but all the forms of cancer as well, right? The minerals can also lead to biological magnification, right? Concentration of a pollutant in living organism as we go up the ladder in the trophic levels, okay? So we have these organisms here that are feeding on small organisms, and this small organisms themselves actually are getting the pollutant. Now, this big fat guy is going to feed on the small guy, concentrating that pollutant. And actually here we see how the pollutant is concentrated as you go from the bottom to the top. And the particular pollutant here is DDT. Now, DDT was used as a fertilizer after the Second World War. And further, DDT was found to actually was found to be very potent at controlling the population of mosquitoes. So worldwide, we started pumping DDT on the environment beside using it as a fertilizer, right? So now you see the concentration of DDT as you go from low trophic levels to high trophic levels. So we are going from 0.000003 particle per million to 25 particle per million. Okay? So this is a high concentration as you go up, right? So this guy is very highly concentrated with DDT. Now, here is one of the issues. It's that when the bald eagle, are actually producing eggs, these eggs are very fragile. The shell is not very hard. And because the shell is not very hard, when the eagle comes and land on the nest, the egg end up breaking, right? Which means that the population of eagle is going to go down, right? You can imagine the rest. All right. We also see loss of biodiversity because of an increase in the population size. Now, what do we call biodiversity? Biodiversity, it's basically the variety of life on Earth, right? That variety is going to be tremendously affected by human activity, right? Loss of biodiversity is associated with loss of habitat, right? We have introduced species or alien species. Now, the problem with introduced species is that in the environment where, say, for instance, you are taking a cute bird from Polynesia, you bring that cute bird here in Ohio. That bird you deem cute is not native to Ohio. So it does not have a natural predator. Now, when you are tired of your bird, you're going to be like, okay, well, now what do I do with my bird? Okay, well, I'm just putting it in nature, which is what a lot of people who actually import exotic animals do, right? So in the environment, now you have these birds, these fishes, these reptiles, right, that do not have a natural predator. So they are over competing the native species. And that is a problem, right? In terms of loss of habitat, right, we have, for instance, the way we are doing fishing, right, is creating loss of habitat because we are using huge nets that we drag on the seafloor, causing a destruction of the habitat. How about when we build developments? How about when we build a new mall somewhere, right? We are destroying habitat, right? We are coming in contact with animals we didn't used to come in contact with before, right? And now, this is because of loss of habitat. Now, not only we going to lose in biodiversity, but also we are going to expose ourselves to potential health issues, and we are going to expose the organism now we are coming more often in contact with to actually develop diseases that they didn't develop before because we are transferring them diseases. But anyway, that's another story, right? Pollution associated with pollution is also associated with loss of biodiversity. For instance, when we lose forest because of acid deposition, if you lose forest, that means the vegetation is gone. If the vegetation is gone, the source of food for animal is gone, right? And you can only imagine what happens after that. Global warming, the loss of the ozone layer, the presence of synthetic organic compound, all right, including compounds that actually disrupt the endocrinal system in living organisms, right, which is causing a major issue. So, overexploitation due to an increase in the population size is going to actually cause, pollution, loss of resources, right? Reduced amount of resource that is available for sustaining our need, the exotic species that we are bringing as pets, right? Hunting tremendously, fishing tremendously, right? The presence of diseases because of human encroaching in places that human do not have any businesses going to, right? So we are going as far as building cities underwater these days. Now, you know, go in Asia, you are going to see the interesting things that are being done in Asia these days. All right. So when we looked at the loss of biodiversity, by far, the loss of biodiversity is associated with the loss of habitat, right? Here we have some species of birds, the macaws, right, that are threatened in South America and Africa for losing their their habitat, right? It's beyond a threat. The habitat is considerably lost, right? So by far, habitat loss is responsible for the loss of biodiversity, followed by introduced species or alien species. Then we're going to have uh, pollution and over exploitation, for instance, deforestation or the use of too much, what do you call that? Too much fertilizers, and too much fertilizers is going to cause overgrowth of algae in body of water, which depletes oxygen, and by depleting oxygen, the what do you call that? The fish do not have enough oxygen to grow, which is going to cause fishes to die, right? And notice that diseases are really the least that is responsible for the loss of biodiversity, which means that our impact, the human, causing loss of habitat, is playing the major role in losing biodiversity. All right. The way we do fishing, dragging nets, here we have the seafloor after dragging nets. That seafloor doesn't provide any place for life to thrive because living organisms like shelters. Where do we see a shelter here? There is no shelter, right? Okay, so they hardly have any place. So our industrial way of doing things, it's not very sustainable, right? So now, why do we talk about this biodiversity? So we talk about biodiversity, and we say, okay, we have to do this, we have to do that. Well, first and foremost, we have to know that biodiversity is beneficial to us. Okay, it is very beneficial to us. There are both direct values to biodiversity and indirect values to biodiversity. What are some direct values to biodiversity for us? For instance, the production of drugs, okay, that can be used to treat cancers, to treat infections, right? We can produce cancer drugs, antibiotics, right? We produce antibiotics from living organisms, including bacteria and fungi. In terms of agricultural values, we have production of food and fibers from crops, right? We can use biological pest control like the ladybugs, right? The wild pollinators, right? Bees, right? That are used as pollinators. The butterflies that are used as pollinators. Bats that can be used as pollinators. Okay, we can have they can have a consumptive value. We're going to have access to fish from the water, not only fish, but many byproducts. Well, byproducts, that's not really the proper way to put it, but both the marine and freshwater are sources of a tremendous amount of food for us. Fruits, vegetables, honey, trees used for wood, for the furnitures that we have in our houses. So here we have the example of a small plant, the rosy periwinkle, that actually is used to produce drugs that is used to treat some diseases, including cancer, including cancers. The armadillo is a living organism, that a mammal that is actually used to study some infections in humans. We have some marine species that can actually be used to extract drugs like painkillers, right? We have pollinators. We have those that can be used as pest control. We have some trees that once you plant them and they are not dead, they keep producing throughout their lives. This is the case of the rubber tree, by the way. We plant rubber tree in Gabon, right? Hevea is produced actually to produce rubber. Is used to produce rubber, right? So we have a lot of benefits there that are direct. But then we also have indirect benefits. What are some indirect benefits? Getting rid of waste, right? Decomposers play a very important role in getting rid of waste. For instance, a lot of oil spills these days are cleaned by living organisms, right? What we call bioremediation. So bioremediation, it's an approach of cleaning the environment from the pollutants that we do produce. Actually, we clean the environment from this pollutant using living organisms. Therefore, bioremediation. We go into the provision of fresh water. Provision of fresh water can be actually, water can be recycled, for irrigation, for drinking. The forest can actually be used to suck the water so that water is not lost, right, to runoffs, right? So instead of water running off to streams and rivers, that water can be retained in the ground, right? Not only that, it also prevents soil erosion. Other valuable benefits of biodiversity is the involvement of living organisms in the biogeochemical cycle, right? Biogeochemical cycles of water, carbon dioxide, phosphorus, to name only those, nitrogen, the regulation of climate, right? Forests play a very important role in absorbing carbon dioxide, right? Which reduces the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Ecotourism, that is more and more in use, which is really very beneficial for humankind. Now, we have to realize that the way we live is not very sustainable, so that we can start asking the questions, what are we doing to create a sustainable environment? Now, in terms of unsustainable way of living, it's, for instance, an uncontrol of our population growth, right? A large population means consumption of high level of resources, right? Now, what is interesting though, it's that when we consider the carbon footprint in less developed countries compared to developed countries, well, while you have more population in less developed countries, believe it or not, the carbon footprint is much, much, much higher in more developed countries than it is in less developed countries. Okay? So we are talking about unsustainable way of doing things, right? Our agriculture, we are using a lot of land, a lot of water, fossil fuel. We're producing pollutants, right? That ultimately are having an impact not only on the environment but also on our health, right? If you consider the agriculture area, we are going to use about 10 lb of grain, 10 pound of grain to produce 1 pound of meat. Now, think about the impact of that if you were to eat only and exclusively meat. Now, when you consider the United States, we are a country of meat eaters, right? We actually eat more meat than we eat vegetables, believe it or not. So that figure that you see here, that it takes 10 pounds of grains to produce 1 pound of meat, you have to think about that. You eat burgers, right? Boy, now let me move on. Okay. So currently, the way we do things is not very sustainable. Why? Because we use a lot of non-renewable resources, including energy, right? We produce acid deposition, which causes loss of forest, right? Global warming, smog, right? We talked about that in the previous chapter, okay? And because we are encroaching on other species, we are causing habitat loss and driving many living organisms to extinction, which is not very good, right? So the slide that you see here shows you actually our unsustainable behavior, but then we are going to talk about sustainable ways to live. Now, for unsustainable behaviors, deforestation and desertification, okay, not very good. Overfishing, lot of terrestrial habitat, okay. Pesticide and fertilizers are causing what we call algal blooming, right? Which is depleting oxygen from bodies of water, and that depletion of oxygen is going to cause fishes to die. Erosion of topsoil, it's a major issue. Urban sprawls and wildlife habitat loss, okay? And air and water pollution and global warming. Now, let's move to the sustainable part. What can we do to create an environment that is sustainable? Well, multi-use farming, rather than using one crop, let's use multiple crops, right? In the same area, right? So you're not just going to plant, potatoes alone or corn alone. You can plant corn with alfalfa, for instance, right? You have development of restoration rather of wetland, estuaries, and deltas, right? Composting, so the recycling, right? Composting and recycling. Mass transit, instead of using our own little transportation vehicle, right? We can use buses that use renewable energy, such as hydrogen fuel, such as hydrogen cell fuels, right? Hydrogen cells, okay? energy efficiency homes, right? And using living organisms as pest control. In our rural environment, what can we do to create a sustainable environment? So plant a variety of crops and trees, use farming techniques that are going to promote a healthy topsoil, right? And decrease destruction and pollution, right? For instance, contour farming, it's something that has shown to be effective, right? Use integrated pest management, like the one I mentioned earlier, the use of, for instance, beetles to actually destroy the pest. Preserves and restore wetland, like projects that are done in preserving mangroves in tropical areas, recycling and composting, use renewable energy forms such as wind, biofuel, solar energy, and very importantly, buy locally. Let me repeat that. Buy locally. By buying locally, you are supporting small farmers that are not using big equipments, that are not using unhealthy fertilizing methods, right? There are organic fertilizing methods that can be used and that are being used in many places. In urban environment, the design of energy sufficient and places, where you live, the mass transit instead of using individual cars, the way we cool and heat our building, creating green roofs. This is very typical in many cosmopolitan areas these days where the rooftops are now using for planting, vegetables, right? If you go in New York City, you are going to see that in many buildings have on their rooftops places to grow vegetables, to even plant small trees. So green belts are being developed in many places. Plant native grass, right? By planting native grass, you're going to attract butterflies and bees. The pollinators are going to come around, and obviously recycle business equipment, right? Anything you can do to recycle is good. Now, when we assess life quality, we tend to think that, well, accumulating a bunch of things is going to provide us a good quality of life, but it is not very so. It is not so. There are things that we have to take into account. Now, there are, the country, at level of the country, there are ways to determine the quality of life. There are ways at individual level to determine the quality of life. Now, at a country level, so you have the gross national product, right? The gross national product, it's actually a measure of the money flow. That money flow actually does not take into account whether you are being environmentally responsible or not. That doesn't take that into account. So really, while we are always considering the GNP, gross national product, we have to be aware at our level, individual level, what we are doing so that our environment is positively impacted. Measures that include non-economical indicators are going to be better indicators as to the quality of life. Why? Because, well, the way I'm going to consume, right? For instance, being able to grow my own tomatoes is going to cause me to not have to buy tomatoes at Walmart, okay? Or at Costco, right? Now, Costco is worried about the economy, Walmart is worried about the economy, but when you plant, you produce, you own tomatoes, you own corn, you are worried about sustainability, right? So, index of sustainable economy is a better way to actually determine the quality of life, right? You have other ways to determine the quality of life, including the Genuine Progress Indicators, GPI, right? Unfortunately, we human, we don't like to sacrifice things. We don't like to sacrifice things, so we always think, oh well, I want my nice cozy place. I want my AC in the summer, because too hot, I don't feel comfortable. But we don't actually think as to how much energy we are using to have that AC. Now, I'm not saying don't have AC. I'm thinking, okay, well, is there a different way to have access to AC, you know, rather than using the traditional way, right? There are many creative ways to actually cool our houses. Now, when you look at the way housing is being designed these days, housing have been designed to be to save energy, right? So you have to really, ask your builder what are the best practices to save energy. So we have to be informed. We have to learn what it takes to sustain our environment. Unless we do this, we are not going to really be able to impact our environment in a positive way, the way we could, right? So now, as we conclude this chapter and this course, my challenge to you is this. What is one thing you are going to do to be a citizen who is impacting his environment in a way that is sustainable? What are you going to do? Okay, so that is my question to you. And my challenge to you is to commit to do one thing, one single thing, right, that you are going to do to have a positive impact on your environment. So this is where we are going to stop this chapter and this course. Thank you for your attention. Bye now.